Hi there. I have one more wonderful guest just before the BKC-IH conference in Moscow. And I have Raul Farguell. Do I pronounce it correctly?
More or less.
Oh, what would be the correct?
The correct pronunciation would be Farguell, but it's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, it's Spanish?
It's actually Catalan.
Catalan, okay. But you come from?
The south coast of England, so a town called Bournemouth, if anyone knows it.
Okay. And you have recently joined BKC-IH as Academic Director of Studies.
Mm-hmm.
You have over 10 years of teaching experience in a variety of contexts, including China, Japan, Spain, and the UK.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Nice geography.
Yes, not bad.
And you have published research on students developing their own grammatical accuracy through peer correction.
Absolutely.
And you have presented at the English UK conferences.
Yep.
You enjoy mentoring and mentoring teachers and teacher training, and as well as working with students to develop learner autonomy.
Absolutely.
All my favorite subjects and exams, and exams.
Yeah, so I teach a lot of exams, and I published something recently as well on the use of can-do statements, and using them not only to set learner objectives, but also to use them so students can reflect on their own learning and measure their own progress.
And your talk at the conference is called Incorporating Exam Skills Without an Exam Focus.
Yes.
And I also like the title. So without giving away too much, can you just share a couple of tips on how you can incorporate exam skills without this being too, daunting about, we prepare for the exams, we prepare for the exams?
So, I mean, there are kind of two strands to this. One is if you're preparing students for exams, it's a bit different to just thinking about how to use exam material. So I'll focus on the former first. When you're preparing students for exams, I think to a greater extent than normal classes, it's the primacy of vocabulary that's super important. So students have all this vocabulary, but usually very good exams, students need to be able to use it quite actively. So I think there are certain things that teachers can do to help students with this. One thing is a really important thing that I'm always trying to emphasize to my students is the use of vocabulary books. And the teacher's job is really to teach students how to record vocabulary, what's important when recording vocabulary, and certain principles.
And sorry, by vocabulary books you mean like in use series of
Well,
Cambridge?
that's one way of revising like vocab, but I mean just get a normal A5 book.
Oh, you mean
and
notebook?
Exactly. And students then sort their vocabulary after lessons into categories, themes. I think the more communicative they are, the better, because exams nowadays, even Russian state exams, are moving in that direction where the aim of all the tasks is to be communicative. So, and then organize vocabulary books around themes. So you might have a whole section on adjectives of personality, where then you describe a best friend. Even on the more grammatical route, you might decide to have a whole section on adverbials for writing or transition phrases. So I think the primacy of vocabulary is one thing that we'll focus on. The second thing, which will link to my talk, will be about tasks and skills needed to pass the exam. And in my talk we use about how these skills and tasks might be useful in general English classes. So I'll especially try to look at what kinds of skills, what kinds of a different challenge exam activities can present for, not only for students who might be maybe not finding general English classes as challenging as they might do, but also for teachers, because for teachers just teaching general English, exam skills or the challenge of teaching exam skills adds a bit of variety to lessons.
Right. Some teachers say that oh, I'm afraid to teach for exams because, it's certain responsibility and I need to make sure that we cover everything. So what sort of advice can you give to such teachers to try it out, maybe not to be that much afraid?
No, I think you should enjoy the responsibility. I think one thing is, hopefully we're in teaching because we want to help students get better. And we encourage students to set goals, and we encourage students to try and work hard to achieve those goals. And then, so what we should do is enjoy that challenge ourselves of helping them, build a pathway towards achieving those goals. And I really think learning how to teach exams goes into other areas as well. There are certain ways of motivating students in exam classes that doesn't always happen with like general English. Just like teachers, students get scared of failing. And I think learning how to deal with students that are scared they're going to fail really helps you as a teacher kind of have a word with yourself if you think you're going to fail. I think the biggest tip I could give teachers if they're maybe a bit apprehensive about teaching exams is, well, make sure you know your stuff. Make sure you really know what the exam asks students to do. Make sure you're able to transmit it to students, so lots of strategies for different tasks. And make sure this becomes a bit of a cycle and a habit. And let students think themselves about how they might handle different tasks and share, and it becomes a collaborative learning process.
Yeah, I totally agree here with the knowing your stuff, because I'm preparing for CAE-CPE, and that's my main specialization. And even though I've been doing that for a couple of years, many years even, still, like every year there's something new, with the assessment criteria, with the strategies, every year I reassess the strategies that I teach,
absolutely.
Improve something on them.
And of course as well, each year you might go to the same material, but last year it didn't quite work as well as I thought it was going to. I'm going to try it a different way, and maybe even you might change material. And I think that part of that kind of reflection when you're teaching exams is really important. And I think we can't beat ourselves up too much about not getting it right the first time, because if I compare my own first year of teaching compared to where I am now,
exactly,
I would be a bit nervous about looking back at some of the first classes that I ever did. And I think teachers should kind of think about exam classes in the same way, or any class really.
I just remember, my first CAE student, so she really had a lot of trust in me, and I'm really grateful to her for that, because at that time I was like, I just passed CAE myself, I was like fresh, and she said, well, come on, I believe you can do it, she said. And I was so overwhelmed, but so I remember I prepared for hours, for every lesson, but it was so rewarding, and it was so really nice that your students had trust in you. But now, looking back, I realized that, so I didn't know so many things, and that was quite natural thing
I remember my first CAE student. It was only my second year of teaching, and she passed the exam, and I was really happy. And then she wrote me a letter, and I didn't know whether this was lost in translation or not, but she used the phrase, "You tried your best."
Okay.
And I was wondering, does she mean it as in I tried my best and I wasn't good enough, or did she just mean you did your best, or you did well? And
that's a funny question. Right, but when you have your first students pass, it's like,
it was quite, it's a really good feeling. It's a really good feeling.
Another question that very often occurs when we talk about exam preparation, is where is this balance between exam training skills and language development? Because, I very often hear the view that, oh, come on, in the exam course you can't really improve the language, you just do this skills training and so on. Well, what is your stance on
I think
that?
this goes back to the first question that you asked. I think vocabulary and language is probably the first thing that teachers should be thinking about. Because of course the step up from first certificate to advanced is not in the exam skills. There's only one difference in the papers, really.
Yeah,
so the skills are largely the same.
Very
but of course,
similar.
the difference in level comes from the amount of vocabulary and knowledge of lexis and grammar that students are expected to know. So I think the first thing teachers should do is focus on the language, and then as the course goes on, skills become of greater importance. But of course, you teach each skill as you go along. You come across it, and then hopefully you notice that there's an interplay where students will need language in order to perform the tasks. The tasks are a rich source of language in and of themselves. So I think teachers should always bear in mind that teaching the skills that students need to do a task maybe at the start is secondary to really showing students all the language that they need in order to pass the exam, because there is a reason why there is a difference in level, and the step up is usually quite steep.
Yeah. Well, I also believe that you have to take care of language. I don't know, at least 50% of the course. Yeah, at least 50, because otherwise it doesn't make much sense. And I personally believe that a good course like CAE preparation course should last 6 months at least, or preferably 8 to 9 months even, because you really need to grow in the language as you progress. How long are your courses usually take?
So usually about at a minimum of 6 months. We occasionally have shorter courses if the students can more or less pass a mock test already, or are very close to passing a mock test. Then we know it's just about exam skills.
Yeah.
So we already know they've got the language is there. And again, I think that highlights the point that the language is really important. And I wouldn't agree with anyone who told me that you can't improve your language. One thing I love about Cambridge exams actually is the range of sophisticated language that they are presenting to students, and hopefully encouraging students to incorporate into their own vocabulary and knowledge. So I would encourage any student to take Cambridge exams, especially if they've passed, for example, any kind of upper intermediate level. I think they should making the switch would really even expose them to a greater variety of languages.
I think that's why I love Cambridge exams. And if we compare it to IELTS, so IELTS is very academic. This very, very much oriented towards this academic discourse, academic vocabulary. And in CAE course, you can tackle more or less any topic.
Absolutely, I mean, of course, you have a difference with IELTS as well. The Cambridge exams, it's possible to fail Cambridge exams, whereas of course IELTS grades you on a scale. And perhaps there's less scope to teach language on an IELTS course, depending on the student's own time frame.
And I just wanted to ask you, about your research about your grammatical accuracy through peer correction. That's, I really love to. I teach mostly teachers, and we have a peer assessment of writing tasks.
That was exactly how I did it. It was through writing.
Perfect. Then can you first tell a bit about why peer learning is effective? How effective could it be, and why is it good to encourage this sort of activity?
So my idea was really, if students are able to read each other's work and find different types of mistakes and strengths, then how much would that then feed back into them proofreading their own work? So how much would that improve their own ability to proofread, self-correct, and stop making persistent errors, especially? Peer review and kind of peer assessment of each other's work is super important, because, for a few reasons. One, if you set a task, all students are working towards a certain goal and communicative outcome, and being able to assess whether someone else has done that and whether they've done that, not only causes the reflection that I hoped it would, but of course we're hoping later in life that when students are out of the classroom and they get a task and they get a goal, that they're able to break it down into its constituent parts and perform maybe quite simple tasks like reply to a work email. But of course, thinking about who they're writing to and what they want to say and how they want to deploy like vocab and grammar and stuff. I think linked to the second bit of research that I did on can-do statements is what's really important is student autonomy. We're moving away now from a classroom where the teacher is the authoritative figure, and students take more responsibility for their own learning. And of course you want to build this kind of culture within the classroom where students feel quite free and liberated when it comes to telling each other about what they think is good and what they think can be improved. And yeah, mostly that the teacher's role is there to facilitate these kinds of situations, and they take so that they take place.
How would you tackle this? I wouldn't say conflicts, but this tension between students that may appear if, I don't know, somebody corrected my mistake and I don't really think that this is a mistake, or this stuff.
Well, that's why the teacher's there.
Yeah, so then you sort of step in.
Yeah, then you might step in and stop it. I think it depends how you set up the task. So the way I did it was we did a piece of writing each week, and then we saved some because in the context I was working in, we had students for 20 hours a week.
So it was a very intensive course.
It was very intense. It was in the morning every day from 9 till 1, and students came. Most of the students were there for at least 6 weeks.
All right.
About 3 or 4 were there for the whole 12 weeks. And so you're able to create a culture where students are not threatened by each other and they get to know each other quite well. But what you do is we set up kind of quite informal style feedback. So I experimented with different ways. One was face-to-face, where they had to name 3 good things and 3 things that they found a problem with.
Could be improved.
So they had to write a letter at some time as well.
A letter to their peer.
Yes, to the students. They created their own correction code. So I experimented in different ways. I didn't find that students were hostile to receiving feedback. Actually, what they found most difficult with at first was finding their own mistakes after when they were told to look back through it. So I don't know, maybe it depends on the culture of the students, but in this context where everyone was quite international and in the same boat living abroad, mostly for the first time, there wasn't much. At least they didn't seem to be too scared of receiving.
It was, I think that there was quite a lot of this sort of team spirit, when they were in this intensive course. Well, I tackle this in a way that I do it anonymously. So they get a code and they submit it in a Google document with a code, and everyone just assesses the essay that is one above.
That's really nice.
And I think that still sometimes some of the people can be too picky, and the others just a bit take offense.
Is this still in your context of teachers?
Yeah.
There's plenty of research to show that non-native teachers are the biggest critics of mistakes. There's plenty of research that show that. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And even though again, we are preparing for CAECP, and I gave them an assessment guide where I basically translated the assessment criteria into clear and simple language, and I kept telling them that it's not about correcting mistakes, it's about target reader, coherence, and so on. And but still at the beginning, I think at least the first 2 or 3 assignments, they were still very concentrated on the mistakes.
So I try and do that as well very early on. With any exam class. Look, this is the criteria. How many of the band descriptors are focused on language alone?
One.
It's only one.
Yeah.
The other three are just as important.
Yeah.
And yeah, to drive that point home is really useful.
Just only 1/4 of your success.
Yeah. And it's most often the lowest scoring as well, because it's the hardest one. And and you've got more chance of getting good marks in content if you read the question properly than than in language.
If you address the target reader.
Yeah.
Right, the last question. What teacher training courses do you teach at BKC? Who do you think they might be useful to?
Okay, so I'm a CELTA trainer. I became a CELTA trainer last summer. I've run 2 courses now as a CELTA trainer. And that's the only course that I run at the moment. Who might they be useful for? Well, anyone who hasn't done a CELTA. So anyone with a well, either especially in our context here in Moscow, anyone who's qualified as a teacher through maybe a linguistic university or like a pedagogical university, and kind of wants a bit more professional development. So someone who comes with a background already within language and wants some new ideas, wants especially to be told or given feedback on their teaching. I mean, that's a big thing of the CELTA. It's the first time where you might teach 8 lessons or 6 hours and someone will tell you, yeah, that was good, no, don't do that, and please never do that again. So lots of our students find that useful, and a lot of our students here come from that kind of background where they are already teachers, and some have already got years of experience and just wanted some new impetus. That's quite useful. And then of course, similar to my own kind of journey into teaching, where I didn't have a language background. I studied marketing at university, and then I spent a year working and came across English teaching, and then said, oh, okay, I'm going to become an English teacher. So also quite good for people who are considering a career change.
Well, which is teaching is still quite in demand.
Absolutely. Teaching is always in demand.
Yeah. And I just wanted to thank you for your last year's session, because I attended it, and after that I wrote an article in my VK group.
Really?
Well, the article was in Russian, but I'm gonna repost the article, and it turned out to be very useful, not just for me but for a lot of my readers. Particularly, I loved your way of demonstrating complex ideas. You had these 3 sentences.
I did, yeah.
And this was just brilliant. This is the way now I explain.
Oh, really? Very happy to hear it.
What is complex idea? How can you communicate?
I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, where the focus on language is really important, but there's got to be an end product with it. There's got to be a use for it, and well, I'm very happy to hear it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for watching.